Hello, everyone. Once again, out there, we have with us today Mark Collinsworth of Vere Global Financial. And today's topic, if you've been watching the stock market news today, a big plunge. Where is it leading? And then we're going to get to Elon Musk and the effect that he's going to have on world affairs after buying up Twitter. So, Mark, welcome back. And let's start off with what's going on with the stock market today. A huge plunge. How come and how bad will it get?
Well, thank you, Larry. There's two big main issues right now facing the market. One, the Federal Reserve is bent on wanting to raise interest rates. They're going to raise 50 basis points at the next meeting, and they're going to officially stop, or what they are hinting towards is officially stopping the QE program, which is where they're going in and buying mortgages and bonds like that to help drive down interest rates. What's kind of shocked the market here in the past week is everyone's been expecting probably 50 basis points from the Fed. Last week, one of the Fed governors said that they're so far behind the inflation curve that they should look at 75 basis points per meeting. And so that's
3/4 of a point interest rate hike.
That is correct. That is 3/4 of a full 1 percentage point. So that's got the stock market on edge from that level. And then the second thing is in China. China's going through lockdowns and everything again, just like they were back here in March of 2020 with COVID. And of course, the Chinese, of course, are saying, "Oh, it's no big issue. We're just taking precautions. People got a little sick and stuff." Kind of the same thing they were saying in January of 2020, but they were not being fully truthful. So with them going down to even more stringent lockdowns and more aggressive testing, and the death rates actually picking up at a fairly steep pace, people now are starting to ask the questions: is there like a COVID-99 Alpha 2 out there or something that's 3 times worse than COVID-19? So that's kind of got the markets on jitter that, the Chinese might not be as honest, and we might be going through this entire scenario again. And then I guess, thirdly, the problem, all the issues coming out of Russia, it looks like the Russia situation is going to drag out for several more months. And there's even, discussions that if Putin starts to lose bad enough, he might actually start to resorting to tactical nukes in the Ukraine.
So this is like a perfect storm that's brewing, all these elements converging.
Correct. You could say that it's a bunch of bad things. Usually the stock market can handle one bad thing or two bad things, but it can't handle liquidity being pulled out of the stock market and all the uncertainty that goes along with it, with Putin, and of course all the problems going on with China. And of course China, with these lockdowns, are starting to shut down a lot of their manufacturing companies. So we get a lot of semiconductors from that region. We already have a supply issue now, which is driving up inflation. And with these factories being locked down from the new COVID restrictions, how much worse is that going to get for semiconductors and manufacturing?
So, Mark, where is this leading, and how bad will it get? How soon?
Oh, for the stock market, as you probably have remembered over all these little video calls we've done for the past few months, I've been very, very negative on the stock market. And I have not seen anything that has changed my mind. It's actually just getting all the problems that we talked about over the last 3 months. Those problems are getting worse, and I expect more pain and turmoil for the stock market between now and the midterm election.
All right. So those who have invested in the stock market have a number of stocks in different areas, and you're a financial advisor. You handle people's accounts. What's your advice to them, to your clients, and everybody out there generally?
I would definitely recommend, you want to stay away from tech stocks. Tech stocks really, really don't like the Federal Reserve raising interest rates. If rising interest rates for a tech stock is like a knife to the heart. So you need to look at stuff like, consumer staples. No matter how bad the economy gets, people still have to eat. Look towards, healthcare stocks. Look for, consumer products, underarm deodorant, toothpaste, those kind of necessities.
Do you recommend going to cash in some areas?
I do recommend cash. I definitely recommend dramatically reducing your exposure to tech stocks, because tech stocks do not do well when the Fed's raising interest rates. The best time to own tech stocks is when the Fed is actually cutting interest rates.
Now, in terms of the chip shortage we already have. Now, an added element could be if China makes a move on Taiwan, correct?
That is correct. That could disrupt the semiconductor market even more.
And if that happens, where do we stand with all these appliances, all these gadgets, all these devices that are solely dependent on the supply of chips?
Well, you might still be able to buy a lot of these same products. You just might be paying a whole lot more than what you used to pay for them.
So, Mark, just summarizing this now, you don't expect it to get any better anytime soon.
That's correct.
So how bad can this get, and how soon?
Well, the Fed's probably going to keep raising interest. Looking at history, the Fed keeps raising interest rates until something eventually breaks. And so I think that's probably what you're going to see happen here. The Fed's going to keep raising rates, and probably, at this point, I don't think we'll go into a recession. But the stock market has been living off of a lot of federal liquidity for the last 2 years, and they cut interest rates to zero in the QE. That money's been taken, or as they say, the punch bowl is being taken away, and the party is over.
Now, the Fed is making these moves on raising interest rates one after the other, and some steep increments, because they're trying to tamp down inflation. But by doing that, they're causing what? Stagflation? Is that the right term?
Well, the stagflation actually is a result of high interest rates and basically low economic activity, which is what we kind of have now. When the Fed says they want to, I hate it when the Fed says our goal is to reduce demand so that we can alleviate inflation. What they're really saying in Federal Reserve speak is we're going to raise interest rates and cause enough people to lose their jobs, which that automatically causes demand to come down, because if you don't have a job, well, there's no demand to buy products because you have no money.
So what should they be doing instead of these interest rate increases? What's a better solution to get a handle on the economy?
Well, they're trying to fight inflation. So they're trying to get demand to go down to basically keep people from being able to spend money again. In other words, lose your job. The biggest component to the inflation right now is high gas prices. If you go to the gas pump, you really feel it there. That's sucking money out of people's pocketbooks. You can really put a dent in the demand for oil in the market if you simply started pumping more oil and gas here in the United States and drive the price of gasoline down. But all the things that the current presidential administration is doing, they continue to do stuff to drive oil higher. Give you an example, just this afternoon, they actually put additional restrictions on Arctic drilling in lands in Alaska and the North Pole.
There's also a lot of talk that all this government spending that we've had has contributed to inflation. Is that the way it's been working? Because the Biden administration has been pouring so much money into the economy with these programs that they've been passing, that in itself is a big element in the increase in inflation.
I hear that a lot on TV, but I'm going to disagree with that element of the inflation, going back to basic economics. So in basic economic theory, the velocity of money is what really causes inflation. The
velocity of money means what?
So if you have, let's say, if the velocity of money, let's say, is 3, that means that the dollar that you had in your pocket, it changed hands 3 times to get to you. So the higher the velocity of money, 3 and 4, that means that same dollar is being passed around. There's a scarcity of dollars being passed around to buy those same products with. Well, the velocity of money has basically been declining, and it really hasn't gone anyplace. What I think is causing a lot of this inflation is not only that we have the supply issues, but another thing is, 2 or 3 years ago, if you went to a restaurant, McDonald's, or went to Target, a lot of retired people were filling in those jobs because they wanted something to do to occupy their minds while they're retired. A lot of those retired people are now scared that they're going to catch COVID and die, so they have basically left their jobs, and those jobs now don't have people there's no replacements to come in, which is making the unemployment rate drop so much. And because of that, companies are having to increase their wages, and by increasing those wages, they have to pass that on to consumers in the form of inflation.
Despite all this, you're saying that we're not headed for a serious recession?
It's still too early to say if we're headed for a serious recession. I wouldn't say we're even headed to a recession at this point, but we are definitely headed for a slowdown. Whether that slowdown turns into a recession or not is really going to come down to how quickly the Federal Reserve reverses and starts actually cutting interest rates.
Now, again, one of the big wild cards in this is another COVID variant or some other pandemic. Now, if we experience that, what happens?
I think if we experienced another COVID variant that was basically cause us to go back into lockdowns, I think the Fed would be much more quicker to reverse policy and actually start pumping money back into the economy.
But that in itself would cause more inflation again, wouldn't it?
It is, but the Federal Reserve looks at it, it's more important to create jobs and then worry about inflation secondarily than worry about inflation first, then jobs.
So there is some validity to the Build Back Better approach where you create all these jobs with all these government sponsored or stimulus programs.
The Build Back Worse package will actually make things worse because what you're doing is you're basically going to create a whole bunch of job openings, but there's no people to actually go into those jobs. And because there's no people to go into those job openings, companies will have to raise wages to attract workers to come to work. And when they, of course, raise wages, it's not the companies paying those wages. They're increasing the prices for the consumer. So the consumer is actually paying for those higher wages through higher prices, which is inflation.
Now, there's more and more fear, at least speculation among some economists, some analysts, that we could be drifting away from the dollar as the world's reserve currency because of what's going on now with Ukraine and all the increased tensions between the US and Russia, where Russia and I guess China and maybe some other nations are beginning to plan their own reserve currency, correct?
That is correct. I am actually a dollar bear. I don't see how you can just keep on printing trillions and trillions of dollars and issuing trillions and trillions of dollars worth of debt. And at some point, your dollar becomes worthless. One of the reasons why the US dollar is the reserve currency is because in some wild trick of the hand, the United States got it to where oil can only be bought in US dollars. That's why every country in the world has to hold dollars. If they want to buy oil, it has to be done in dollars. And you're correct, there is discussion because Russia and China see all these sanctions that are being slapped on Russia. They're coming up with an alternative plan to basically move away from the dollar so they're not pressured by the United States controlling their governments.
But that would be far down the road, wouldn't it?
I believe that would be far down the road.
But when it happens, it's really bad news.
When it does happen, I think you will see a huge decline in the dollar.
And then what happens generally to the US economy?
Well, usually when you see a huge decline in the dollar, normally you see more jobs are shipped overseas by US companies because it's cheaper to basically have those products made in the United States and then sell them back made elsewhere and then sold in the United States. So you'll see jobs leave the country, and historically a weaker dollar does bring about higher inflation because everything becomes more expensive from buying it outside the country.
You know, in terms of a more long range prognostication, a lot of people are saying that this century is going to be China's century increasingly. The US and the West are in decline. Do you agree with that?
I definitely agree with that. The US is kind of, there used to be a time when, made in America. We've gotten away from that. You pick up a baseball cap, shoes, anything, it's made in Vietnam, it's made in Indonesia, it's made in China. So we've really gotten away from that by, allowing other countries to make products. Those countries have also taken trade secrets and have actually improved upon them. Really, the only thing the United States does well these days that they have the upper hand on is we make the best weapon systems in the world. That's really the only thing we do really well today.
Yeah, it's and also, I mean, it's counterproductive because of the increased international tensions now, especially with Russia. And here's another thing. I mean, people are actually saying now that this could escalate into a nuclear war. Now, that seemed far-fetched just a little while ago, but now people are talking about that more, do you see that as an alarmist position, or do you think we're approaching the possibility that nuclear war could break out between the great powers?
I am going to say at this point, no. And the reason why, everybody knows that nuclear wars, is, the mad principle. No one wins a nuclear war. Kind of like from war games playing tic-tac-toe. There's no winner in a nuclear war. However, I do believe if you push Putin into a point to where it looked like Putin was basically going to be removed as president of the country, because they're thinking about putting war crimes on Putin, kind of like they did against the Nazis in Germany. If they were to try to press charges and take Putin and put him in like a Nuremberg trial or something to prosecute him on war crimes, I think you would push Putin into a point. It's either I die at the hands of an executioner for war crimes, or I go ahead and kill myself by initiating a nuclear war, and everybody.
Well, there's also the factor, and this has been the same thing since the Cold War began, where through miscalculation or just a simple mistake or somebody going rogue, it could develop into a nuclear war. So those wild cards are still in play, are they not?
That is correct. We've actually come very close to nuclear war on 2 different occasions during my lifetime, just from certain planes flying too close to someone else's border or going into their airspace accidentally. And then, of course, people remember predominantly the nuclear missile crisis in Cuba with the Russians going to run the U.S. blockade and stuff like that. So, yes, it is a possibility that you get two enemies too close together and somebody gets trigger happy, and the next thing you know, it just dominoes.
Lloyd Austin, the defense guy, and other officials in the Biden administration have plainly stated just the other day that they want to weaken Russia by prolonging the war in Ukraine. So that in itself is very dangerous, is it not?
That is very dangerous on multiple levels. One, Putin's really got to get the Ukraine thing really, kind of knocked off the map. The reason being is, as everyone knows, the Russian winter is very, very devastating. Adolf Hitler and Napoleon both were defeated because of the Russian winter. When you start getting around November of this year, if Putin still has forces there, it's very hard to fight in sub-zero temperature. So he's going to have to make a big push between now and the winter, so he's not stuck in that scenario. What was that? You had a second part of that question that
It was, whether or not weakening Russia, and that's their stated goal now, according to the U.S. defense officials. So, if that's why they're prolonging the war, to weaken Russia and perhaps oust Putin as the end result, then again, that's going to make Putin much more defensive and paranoid, perhaps, and that itself could lead to a miscalculation into nuclear war.
It could. And what they're really doing, they're not really hurting Putin that much, because, Russia exports so much. Russia is the largest producer of wheat in the world. It's one of the largest producers of fertilizer. Because of those problems, not to mention energy for Western Europe, the rest of the world is hurting. Food prices are going up because of Russia. Gas prices are going up because of Russia. If you really, really wanted to hurt Putin and hurt Russia, turn the United States into a gas station and pump oil and drive the price of oil down to like $10 or $8 a barrel, and that will put a hurting on Putin like you have not seen.
But Biden's woke agenda won't allow that.
That is correct.
So therefore, it's just going to be getting more and more of a tense situation and more of a blow to our economy.
Well, and I also kind of have a theory on this. Putin really went into the Ukraine because he basically had his back pushed against the wall. After the Iron Curtain fell, the gentleman's agreement after the Iron Curtain was NATO wouldn't expand any further towards the east. And of course, they have now almost every country that used to be a part of the Iron Curtain now is a member of NATO. And Putin had begged them for years on this. The Ukraine invasion occurred because Putin didn't want NATO missile systems sitting in a country so close they could hit Moscow within a moment's notice.
Right.
If if a Biden really wanted to fix this, all he had to do was have a closed door meeting in secrecy and tell Putin, hey, I'll make sure Ukraine never enters NATO if you guarantee me that you won't invade the Ukraine. But they didn't do that. And my theory here is historically, crisis of this magnitude historically has boosted up the poll numbers for a president. But in this scenario, they have not boosted it up. I really think the original plan here was to cause all these problems with Russia and Ukraine to basically give a poll boost to Biden, and that didn't develop because he could have fixed the problem with the closed door meeting.
Yeah. There's also talk about possible food shortages in America because of what's going on. Do you see it that way?
I don't think you'll have a food shortage in the United States per se. Now there is some food shortages developing in China right now. I've seen some pictures of some grocery stores where they're like total barren. The reason why I don't think you'll have it here in the United States is we still produce a lot of our own food. We still export a lot of our stuff. However, if you go back to during the Great Depression, during the Dust Bowl, if we were to have a major drought here in the United States, then yes, I believe you could see huge food shortages here in this country if we had a drought.
Well, also just the cost of fertilizer was 4 times what it used to be. So farmers are either not planting the crop because it's too expensive, or another factor is with Biden now allowing an increase in ethanol from 10 to 15%, that's going to cause more farmers to grow for ethanol and not the other crops, right?
That is correct. That is correct. Well, in another scenario, and this comes back, one of the biggest costs for farmers is, of course, gasoline for your tractors and gasoline for your irrigation system to run the machines to pump the water out, and gas prices for moving your trucks from the farm produce to the grocery stores. Again, if you brought down the price of gasoline, that would be a huge cost savings to farmers because, the tractors, the machinery, the pumps, the trucks, they would save a huge amount of money just on transportation costs. But again, we don't want that because we have to switch to a green energy source.
Well, just considering what I just mentioned about the increase in the cost of fertilizer and all that, if that doesn't lead to an actual food shortage, won't it at least lead to a huge increase, a steep increase in food prices?
That is correct. The higher fertilizer prices are not going to be paid by the farmers. They will be paid by the consumer because at the end of the day, you have to eat. You're more inclined to not pay your mortgage for 3 or 4, 6 months because it takes that long for you to get kicked out of your house. You can't go 3 or 4, 6 months and not eat. So they know the consumer will still buy those food products.
So, how much of an increase do you expect as a possibility? And, will it be steep enough to have people going broke, it's either food or medicine or mortgage, and, thrusting a lot of people into dire straits?
I think to answer that question, I do think you'll see probably more, stealing at grocery stores and stuff. Even people, stealing gas from cars and stuff. But I don't think we're at the point to where you're going to see a massive, I don't think you'll see riots and stuff like that at this point. I think if you're going to have riots to occur, you'd again have to go back to that drought scenario that actually caused the 20 to 30% of your food crop just to be destroyed from the drought.
Okay, let's turn now to another development involving a guy named Elon Musk and what it means. If I get his picture up here we go. He's kind of telling everybody, hey, he actually did it. Now, how significant is his takeover of Twitter, and what does that mean for free speech, and will it also have an effect on the economy somehow?
Well, you really got, it's kind of this is really laughable. You've got Democrats that you got a guy that makes green cars, right? Energy efficient cars. The Democrats should love this guy, but he talks about free speech because he says Twitter is designed to help Democrats out, and they're going crazy over this.
Yeah.
I saw an interview today on TV. There was a guy on TV that said this is the worst case scenario. You're going to have a guy now that is going to purposely suppress news on conservative politicians, and you won't know the true dirt out there on conservatives now because he's going to suppress bad news for conservatives. Is that not what Twitter's been doing for the last 10 years to the Republicans?
I mean, they're accusing him of about to do what they've been doing all along in terms
Yeah,
of
the hypocrisy is just, I just can't believe this. But anyway, yeah, it may create some jobs. I know Texas is, Elon's moving his Tesla factories to Texas. There's people in Texas right now asking Elon, hey, why don't you move some of those Twitter jobs to Texas as well?
that would be a good idea, yeah. But also now, we're all hoping that he means what he says about free speech, unfettered opinions, unlike what Twitter has been and other social media platforms. But can he be pressured into not fulfilling his free speech promise because of his dependence on China, where he has factories for his models, and also dependency on chips for the Teslas?
Well, yeah, and he's going to run into some problems because there's always going to be misinformation, and some countries around the world, Europe, China, they don't have the same degree of freedom of speech where you can basically say anything. So there will be some kind of, I do believe there will be some kind of filtering system. Maybe it won't apply to the United States, but you can set up Twitter so that those tweets that we're talking about that might be damaging to the Chinese politicians, you can actually set the Twitter feeds so that those bad remarks actually don't appear on Chinese Twitter accounts. They may still appear on U.S. accounts, they just wouldn't appear on those.
In addition to the China factor, I mean, they're going to go after him tooth and nail. How else can they give him problems? And what other attempts do you expect them to make to destroy Elon Musk's new Twitter direction?
I think if you're looking at, I'm assuming you're talking about what they're going to try to do here in the United States. I don't think the foreign countries have a problem because you can block the Twitter feeds.
Right.
There. Here's where he's really going to focus at. And I think the first problem you're going to have is this is the first time that a private citizen, not a corporation, is going to take over a major media company as a personal investment. I can see a lot of problems with this going to the Department of Justice and they using, I can see the Department of Justice, which is liberal right now, saying that this will be used to suppress free speech and try to use that as a way to basically stop the deal from going through.
Well, also, he's going to pay for the Twitter purchase with Tesla, with the value of Tesla stock. Now, Tesla stock has gone down with all the others in the stock market this week.
That is correct, because people believe, I think Tesla stock dropped about 12% today. And it dropped because some people are speculating he may have to sell some of his Tesla stock to actually pay for the down payment on his Twitter investment.
Now, can he actually fulfill the payment for Twitter, or could he not have enough cash to do it?
Oh, if he wanted to, he could sell enough Tesla stock that he could basically make the entire $45 billion purchase off of selling Tesla stock. I don't think he'll do that because if he sells his Tesla stock, he's going to owe taxes on capital gains on $45 billion. If I had to guess, he'll probably take out a loan and use the Tesla stock as a loan. So that way he gets to write the interest on the loan off as a tax deduction, and that buys his Twitter position.
For those who are skeptical about his whether his motives are pure and whether this is driven by principle, is there any way that he could be benefiting from this personally? In other words, is there a hidden agenda with this other than him wanting to unfetter speech in America again? Can there be something else going on that we don't know about? Why he made this move, and it wasn't about reestablishing free speech?
Well, it could be several things. The new CEO of Twitter and him have not been on the best of terms. And of course, there's a lot of hedge fund managers that are very skeptical about the financial condition of Tesla, that Tesla might be using some very creative or some very aggressive accounting tricks to make his earnings look as good as they look. And they use Twitter quite a bit to basically disclose what their thoughts about Tesla on it. You could see this as a way for him to basically suppress some of these hedge fund managers from asking questions that he probably really doesn't want to answer.
But all in all, you would say that this is a good move in terms of letting people say what they think and not being censored.
I think it's great. I think you should always hear both sides of an argument. You know, I have some liberal friends, very few, and you know, when we have discussions, you know, I'm very curious to know what their side of the argument is. I want to know why they think a certain way, and they want to know why I think a certain way, and it makes for a very good conversation. When you use something like Twitter and you're only cutting one side of it and you're not getting to hear the other side of the argument, that leads to a lot of animosity, a lot of just anger. You know, let's use the Civil War, for example. One of the reasons why the southern states got so fed up with the northern states is the northern judiciary system, for the court system, would not listen to the griefs that the southern states had against northern states. And because they weren't listening, it really infuriated them to not want to be a part of the union. Of course, multiple other reasons were out there, but that was actually listed. That was one of the grievances listed in the Declaration of Independence, to leave the union because the court systems was not listening to the complaints.
Part of the untold story of what led up to the Civil War. Okay, that does it for now, considering what's going on with the stock market. Overall, you're saying don't panic, don't look for the nearest window to jump out of, because it's not going to be that bad. Just be careful what stocks you stay in and what stocks and switching it. Wrap it up quickly for us, and once again, encapsulate what an investor should do that has stocks now in the market.
Yeah, buy companies that you know. Don't go out and buy these high flyers that have taken off like a rocket because of the COVID outbreak. Buy products that you know. If you drink Coca-Cola, you drink Pepsi, you eat Kellogg's, those are products that you know. Consumer staples, healthcare stocks, but stay away from the companies. If you got to have a PhD in computer engineering to understand how a business works, you probably shouldn't be investing in that company.
And going to cash?
Cash is actually a great investment. I think there'll be a better buying opportunity. Like I said, this is a mid-year election term. Historically, what we're seeing, this is actually fairly normal for what you see in a midterm election year. And usually the market bottoms out in late October, early November. So have some cash on hand to take advantage of the bottom that I think will happen here in October.
Okay, you're not saying cash out everything. Go.
Don't cash out everything. But if the stocks that people love to own right now are the tech stocks. The tech stocks have done really well over the last 5 or 6 years. And people make the mistake, well, if they've done well for the last 6 years, they should do great for the next 6 years, and they're still buying those stocks. And that's not the way you should look at it. You should be looking at the business and what the price of that business actually would go for if you bought it yourself.
Mark, how do people get a hold of you?
You can go to, I got a website, vereglobal.com. That's Vere, V-E-R-E, global.com. And then, of course, they can reach me at my number, 901-488-5667.
Okay, Mark Collinsworth of Vere Global Financial Wealth Management. Thanks once again for your insight and for being with us. Thanks, Mark.
Anytime. Enjoyed it.